coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, do not hold that against me. As I said, I am a licensed real estate broker. I serve Silicon Valley right here in California, the subject of which we will discuss today. I am not sure that is a correct sentence, but we're going to be talking about some interesting data with very local numbers. We're going to talk Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill. Some very interesting stuff. Do a little compare and contrast. If you'd like to reach out to me directly, you can find me at my website, soldbyrobert.com. You can also find the home of the podcast at therebelbroker.com. And if you would like to chat with me live and discuss these numbers or the numbers that will be upcoming, because I haven't crunched all the numbers for July yet. As I record this, we are right in the last day of July. And I like to wait a few days until we get a little bit more into the next month, because for whatever bizarre reason, the numbers tend to move around a little bit when reported by the MLS. So I like to give them at least a few days. That's one of the reasons why I do the coffee and real estate on the third Saturday of the month instead of the first Saturday. There's no question by the time you get to the third Saturday of a month, those numbers have settled for the MLS. But there is so much going on right now. I feel like it's better to get that information out sooner. We will still have our coffee and real estate on the third Saturday of this month. So I would encourage all of you to join me for the conversation. It lives on Facebook Live, but it also gets streamed to, and I hope I don't miss anything here, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Is there another one? I think that's it. And you can find me on any of those platforms simply by searching for Robert Whitelaw or Rebel Broker or Real Estate Realities. Any of those will get you to me. So you can absolutely participate on your preferred platform. But in terms of easiest way to communicate, being on Facebook Live is probably the easiest way to go. And on Facebook Live, you can simply search for Whitelaw Real Estate or Rebel Broker or Robert Whitelaw, and you should find it in any of those. Or if you want to take the absolute easiest way, you can simply go to soldbyrobert.com, scroll down, and there's a countdown to when the live chat, the coffee and real estate live chat, will begin, and there is a link to the page where it's going to happen. So, plenty of ways to find it. No matter how involved you want to get into which platform you consume it, let me suggest you join me for these conversations. And of course, it's interactive. So while we're going to cover the usual things we cover in terms of hitting last month's numbers for Santa Clara County, San Jose, and Morgan Hill overall, I love taking questions from folks who have decided to join me, and we could talk about any city, area, community that you like. So feel free to join me and take advantage of that. Now, this month, as I look back, I've been very fascinated by the ratio of list price increases to decreases. Now, of course, the far more, I guess, solid numbers would be what the original list price was versus what a home sold for. And of course, we track those in the coffee and real estate data that we discussed. But I've been very much looking into these weekly things I've started doing called my 7-day snapshot. And I do those only for Morgan Hill right now, but it's just a way to look at what's happened in the last 7 days. And I've always sort of done it. This is basically a dashboard that I check every morning when I get up. One of my habits of real estate is I'll get up, I'll go check my MLS dashboard, and on there is a 7-day snapshot of what's going on with homes sold, homes listed, price increases, price decreases, everything. There's a nice range of stuff that gets covered in that data. And what I've noticed is obviously the complete flip, right? We've gone from almost no price reductions to and tons of price increases to very few price increases and tons of price reductions. And we're not talking minor reductions. We are talking 5%, 7. I'm reading off my list. 5%, 7%, 2%, 3%, 9%, 20%, 8%. We are seeing some 41% price drops. That one's insane. This is one in San Jose, still active. Original list price was $868,000. Its previous list price was $849,000. So it had been dropped $20,000, and now it's at $600,000. So substantial drops. We're talking $200K plus, $250,000 drop just in that property. So I'm looking at these and I'm trying to, for my own personal interest, I'm trying to find where my best opportunities might lie. What's also been interesting is in the past, in conversations we've had during this show, we've talked about how homes at the higher end tend to get hit first. And we were seeing that in our initial drops. Now what we're seeing is while we do still see at that upper echelon, and depending on what community you're in, that number moves, right? I guess you'd call it the quote unquote luxury market, but you hit a point at about 1.8 million in an awful lot of markets where you would expect anything over than that to get bigger drops. And you tend to see that. But now these big drops are happening at what was classically below the average sales price of a home. The average sales price of a home in the home we just discussed that had that gigantic 41% price drop was absolutely in a neighborhood where the average home price would have been about $1.2 to $1.3 million. So that was a very reasonably priced home in the old marketplace that has now been completely hit. Now, of course, it looks like I can go back to that one again here. I'm actually looking at a set of the data here. This one, and this is a perfect example of what we're talking about. This one is a townhome, so it's not a single family residential home. It's only a 2-bed, 2-bath. It was listed. When were you listed? So it was listed in April of 2022, and it is still on the market. It's been on the market for 109 days. And this is the new reality. I'm scanning the photos. This is a very respectable looking place. It looks like it has an updated kitchen. Again, though, but it is a condo. And again, this dovetails in perfectly with conversations we've had before. When things start to go nuts, the most at-risk properties are things like condos. Right? The things that tend to drop value sooner are those super high-end homes where because of financial stresses relating to borrowing money, you'll see things at the high end start to drop because those buyers will lower their price that they're looking to pay. But then in terms of desirability, condos often suffer in terms of price because the only way they're going to get themselves sold is if they bring their price down. So lots of interesting options here. And this one happens to be vacant. So whoever the owner of this property is, who's been holding on to it and paying the mortgage, paying the power bill, paying the gas bill, paying the HOA fees, has been watching this thing drop for 109 days as of today. I mean, these numbers aren't from yesterday. These literally, I just generated them as I was kicking off the show. And that, I think, is a perfect example of what we're seeing in the marketplace. It is a wholesale drop in prices in so many different segments of this marketplace. Now, we're going to talk about a couple other things. Right now, these numbers I'm pulling up are for Santa Clara County in general. So I'm looking at all of them, and I'm just sort of scanning the numbers. And there's a pretty big, well, I mean, the highest drop that we've seen is the one that I mentioned, the home that's in San Jose. It's actually on Hamilton Avenue, which is, it's a desirable area. I mean, I actually grew up not far from there. I remember, Hamilton Avenue is right where I would ride my bike down to the old DJ Hobby store when I was in junior high school and late elementary school. So, I mean, I'm familiar with these areas. I've done an awful lot of business in these areas. Here's another one, 40% drop. This is basically a $400,000 drop. Here's a home that originally listed for 1.399, so 1.4 million. and now has been dropped to 999,000 or 1 million. Again, not in a challenging area, but just the market is doing this. The next one, 31.38% drop from 1.298, so basically 1.3 million to 988,000. So these are markets where things are going crazy. And historically, when we've talked about these areas, these have been areas where we've talked about the greatest increases. If you look back to past, and actually all of the coffee and real estates are available for replay. So I actually leave them as replayable. Of course, experiencing them live, I think, is better because you can ask questions, we can get answers live. But if you look back, I've been doing it now for a few years, and take a look and compare. Go ahead and look at June of 2020 or 2021 and see the difference in what was going on with prices. So the key here is what's happening in your area. How much of a drop are you seeing in home prices? Because this is going to spell an amazing opportunity for an awful lot of folks. Now, granted, I get it. Interest rates are super high right now. That's not a great thing. The cost of renting money, and that's the way you should think about it, right? So many folks get hung up on this. If you think of it as something you're renting, if you were going to go on vacation and rent a car, you wouldn't just go to one vendor and let them charge whatever they want to charge, right? You'd check a bunch of different folks who want to rent you that car. You should be doing the exact same thing with your money that you're going to borrow or rent. And the reality is you can refinance later. When interest rates go down, if they go down, you can refinance. But of course, make financial decisions for yourself today that you can easily manage. I don't think anyone right now, given the way things are going, should get themselves into a financial scenario where they're struggling. So just keep that in mind too. Be a little bit more conservative in the way you're approaching these things, but also recognize that there are profound opportunities that I think are going to be making themselves available. Now, let's also calibrate ourselves to the fact that this is just the end of July. This whole thing started over the last couple of months, and the big pivot was really last month. But we are continuing to see this grow. I do not think we have seen the peak of this. So the potential opportunities, I think, are difficult to ignore. And I think if you're someone who's looking at purchasing a home, in my market, for instance, the future is bright for you in terms of availability and what homes will be available. But if we take a look, if we just go back to my little dashboard, and just do a big comparison. Now, this is Santa Clara County. New listings over the last 7 days, 338 new listings. List price increases, there were 18 of them. List price decreases, there were 242. And that's basically the exact opposite of what it was just a year ago, right? 30 transactions fell through. 9 homes are back on the market after having fallen through. 89 changed to contingent over the last 7 days. 218 went pending. The difference between contingent and pending: contingent means there are still articles of the contract that would allow the buyer to back out without penalty, right? There's conditions that are still outstanding. Once they've released all conditions, released all requirements of the contract, that becomes contingent, right? Or excuse me, that is contingent. Once they release it, boy, did I screw that up. A contingent contract is one that still has things open for the buyer to get out of the transaction without losing any of their money. Pending means they've released all contingencies. All right. So we have 218 that have gone pending, changed to sold 244 in this week. Listings expired, 20 listings expired in the last week, and 64 listings were canceled. And these numbers represent such a change that again is just the beginning of the change that I think it's worth taking note of. And what I would like you to do, if you're someone in my local market, we can absolutely have a chat about this. I have access to all this data, so we can figure out what's happening in your micro market. And that's the second part of this. Recognize that while this is happening in a broader market, there are also micro markets. And there are some micro markets that aren't really seeing this at all. There are some areas that are still so desirable that they are still getting multiple offers. It is still happening. So I want to make sure everyone understands that it is not market wide in terms of it happening everywhere, particularly since we're talking about Santa Clara County, which is a gigantic geographical area. And that micro markets still matter. In fact, micro markets matter more now than ever. The other part of this is that we have seen an awful lot of agents, and this is sort of what I'm trying to run down for you are the things you should now be thinking about, right? As a buyer, seller, and investor, you now need to be, I believe, far more concerned about selecting the right agent. Agents for a while now have been able to do very little and simply count on the momentum of the market to carry the transaction, right? Because even if they were getting average results or even a little below average results, those results were still pretty amazing given the market. Now, the best agents will get you results that beat the average of the market, which is what I shoot for in every transaction I do. If I am not beating what's going on in the average comparable home in that market, if I'm not beating the average in terms of price or amount over asking, days on market, terms and conditions, if I'm not beating the market on average, then I'm doing a self-evaluation to figure out why that didn't happen. What happened? Was it an external force? Was it something I can change in the way I do business? It's all about delivering top-notch results, right? And a lot of agents have now been able to tout how great their results are, not because of what they were doing, but because of the momentum of the market, right? And when you start asking questions like, okay, well, on average, if you did a competitive market analysis for that listing that you just got and you sold it in 20 days for 4% over asking price, that's great, but the only way that you can measure whether or not that's a good performance is, well, what was the average in that marketplace, right? So if and you should know that the results of the competitive market analysis that this agent would have done for you should have included enough data so that you could see, okay, well, the average home in my market that you chose as comparables, Mr. or Mrs. Real Estate Person, was selling for 6.5% over asking price. You got it for 4%. You underperformed. Right? Is that not? And I realize that's a moving target because the variable is that list price. If you severely underlist in terms of picking a very low number, and that may be a perfectly valid strategy because you want to garner more interest to get more multiple offers, that kind of thing. That is a strategy that gets used. That can artificially boost the percent over asking price that ends up being the result. But again, it at least gives you something to measure. And in a marketplace like this, it's useful for you as a buyer, seller, investor to understand where does your agent's quote unquote strength come from, right? Because for you as a consumer of real estate services, it doesn't matter how many homes that person has closed in the last year. It matters how well they closed the homes they did close. So are they beating the average or are they not beating the average? And you need to assess that. And an awful lot of agents are going to be able to throw you some great numbers on, well, look at this. This home I sold, I got my folks X amount over asking price. Now, when I brag, and I'm not immune, I will brag from time to time. I have a couple of standout cases of homes that were particularly challenging where I broke every record, meaning I sold it faster, I got the most over asking, I got the most period ever in that community. Finley Ridge jumps to mind, where all the homes are off grid, meaning no electricity comes to those properties, no phone lines, no power lines, no sewer, no nothing. So they're already a challenge. It's a different kind of bunch of folks who will buy a home like that. Not to mention how much more time it takes to get to it. I would argue the payoff is amazing. I mean, for those of you who saw my Finley Ridge listing, I think it was 2020. And that was at a difficult time. During that time, there was the great 4th of July fire, which literally came to the property line of the home that I was in contract on. I consider that one of my great successes. Broke every record. Had so smartly selected our buyers that I knew it would survive the fact that a fire came right to the property line, and it did, which was why. And keep in mind, in that particular scenario, I advised my clients that while this was not the highest dollar amount offer, so in other words, I could have gotten them an even higher record-breaking amount for an even higher percentage, my estimation of the, what should I say, determination of these buyers indicated to me that if anything funky happens, this person will stay in the transaction. This person will stick. They get it. This other person was not. This was more of an urban person who I think had a romanticized view of what was going on, and I had a feeling that if anything happened, they would balk. They would step away. So, that's my big pat on the back for Robert, right? I feel like we smartly did that one, and we broke every record in doing it. What you want is your version. It doesn't have to be me. I would love to be your agent if you're in an area that I serve. But the reality is you need someone who focuses on that. And now, and I've always made that a thing I've tried to educate folks on, but now it is more important than ever. Right now, what we're seeing are agents that are screaming about lowering list prices in order to get a home sold. It is becoming a frenzied race to the bottom for a lot of agents, because that's the only trick they have in their bag. It's and this will be the speech. The speech will be, the only variable right now is price. Yeah, okay, I get that if all you're doing is the MLS, right? But if you've got an agent who is getting better results, the MLS isn't the only game for them. Here's another little side note that I take pride in relating to that Finley Ridge sale from a couple of years ago. We had, I think, 6 offers on that house. Only 2 of them came from folks who fanned the house to the MLS. The rest of them contacted me through non-MLS sources that I had advertised on separately to directly hit folks most likely to be attracted to this kind of property. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the person who ended up buying did end up being someone from the MLS, but the fact remains, and one of the offers we had that was one of the highest ones was not from the MLS. The fact remains it got more eyeballs on the transaction, and more eyeballs equals better results for sellers. And right now, agents are using the old playbook, right? Slap it on the MLS, do whatever cookie cutter stuff we normally do, and still hope for really good results. And the reality is in a market like today's, your agent should be working harder for you, right? And agents are still talking about, does what I do scale, right? So they're all about getting more and more clients, getting more done with less of their time invested. So they end up delegating an awful lot of what gets done for you to a quote unquote team, which is another thing I have issues with, right? The key parts of the transaction should still be mastered by the agent you've hired and paid to do the job. So I realize that's sort of a long-winded way of saying, make sure you're choosing the right agent. One of the interesting things that's likely to happen is we're going to see a cleaning of the decks in a lot of ways for a lot of agents. I think this is one of those businesses where when things are good in real estate, everybody from every corner suddenly wants to have their real estate license or wants to turn their license back on again. But while I would love this to be a house cleaning exercise where all the bad agents get tossed, or at least the folks I consider bad agents, maybe, and you may define a bad agent a different way. I would love to see that happen. I would love to see it flush all of these agents who are focused on getting people to sign that listing agreement and not providing great service. I would love to see them be the ones that suffer the most. Sadly, never happens because they're still really good at getting people to sign up, but they're also super bad at getting market-beating results. So these folks that will often advertise themselves to you as a top producer, do not take that as a reason to hire them, because the odds are 99.9% of the time, the things that define them, that they're letting define their status as a top agent, should mean absolutely nothing to you as a buyer, seller, and investor. Maybe as an investor, if you're looking to sell hundreds of units, well, then maybe that's the agent for you, because that's probably what their success is based on. They can say, I sold the largest number of homes in my office last year, or I sold the largest dollar amount of homes. That's typically what it gets, or I listed the largest number of homes. Those are the kinds of numbers, none of which describe the quality of the work that was done, right? Again, something we've discussed before. Check out my old shows. I've done entire hours. Just this is my soapbox. This may be the soapbox that started this show in January of 2007. So I won't get into it now because I'll go into the weeds and we'll never escape. But the point I'm making is ask the tough questions. Insist that they discuss with you, how do they measure performance? In their minds, as someone who wants your business, how do they define doing a good job for you? Right? And if they say the right things, which they probably will, because that's part of the script, get you the best price, et cetera. Well, how do you get the best price? How do you get a price that's better than everybody else? Right? How do you beat it? And show me data that tells me you've actually done that. Because the data is there. It's a little bit tougher on buyers to pick an agent, but for you sellers out there, all of the history of all the homes that have been sold and what they were listed for and what they sold for, and the other sold data of comparable homes in that same month, it's all there. So it can absolutely be shared. So don't let anyone ever tell you, well, there's no way really to measure that. That would be a lie. Anyway, okay, so there's that. Now let's get into this a little bit, because normally, when I'm having a conversation with you about, hey, here are great places to invest, we're not talking about California. I've talked about Sacramento in the past. I've talked about the Central Valley, right? I've said, well, I wouldn't mind doing a multifamily in Stockton, for instance, which is the truth. I've mostly suggested, hey, check out Round Rock, just north of Austin. Check out Austin. Check out, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Check out this suburb of Atlanta. Right. So whenever we've had conversations about opportunities, it's been, well, how far are you willing to go from where you live? If you're someone in California, it might be a scenario where you should be willing to go further. Now, granted, that wasn't the tenor of our conversations back after 2007, say to 2015. There was still plenty of opportunities there to be had. I want to focus now on wherever you live. Does the current scenario spell opportunity for you? In Santa Clara County, San Jose, Morgan Hill, Gilroy, there are now opportunities that are presenting themselves that I'm not sure we'll see again for a long time. Now, another interesting thing, and here's a subject for discussion, and I'd love to hear from you folks on what you think of this. There was a question asked on, I keep a tab on real estate questions that get asked on Quora. And Quora is a great mix of some of the oddest real estate questions I've ever seen and some of the best. But it was asking things like, where do you see prices dropping? What represents a great opportunity? Now, this question that got asked was, is it possible that we could see the biggest real estate crash of this generation in the next 2 years? I suppose it's possible. I don't think it's likely. So last time we talked about the debt profile, right? We were talking about car loans. And I was correct. Just to bring everyone up to date, if you listened to last week's show, and I don't know why I couldn't find it. Immediately as soon as I posted that podcast, suddenly everywhere I looked was that $1.4 trillion car loan number verified. So yes, I was correct with $1.4 trillion. Now that is, if we do a compare and contrast to the last big real estate downturn, the real estate indebtedness was 7-point-something trillion. So slightly less than, so about 1/7, right, of the amount of indebtedness. But the question then becomes, does the amount affect it? And I think the amount does to a certain degree. Not sure it's going to be a one-to-one relationship, because the bottom line is, once you get into a bad financial scenario, I think that this particular problem is spread out among more people, more individuals than last time. So we have less of an indebtedness problem, less of a bubble than we did with real estate before, and it is spread out to a larger number of households. Given that, we would now need to know how many of those households are homeowners. How many of them have a mortgage versus rent, right? And I don't have those numbers. I did a lot of digging, couldn't find those numbers. So is this going to be the largest downturn that we've seen in a generation specifically for real estate? My guess would be no. I would guess it's far more likely that we see a real estate downturn that is in some way less than the last one. But we've got this combination of inflation and recession, and obviously recession kind of got going after the downturn. So what does that equal for us? Calibrate yourself to what happened in 2006, 7, and 8, and 9. I say reduce it by 20%, maybe 30%, and I believe that's probably where we'll hit. Right now, we have a lot of weird balking going on. We have a lot of folks who try to say we're not in a recession. We are in a recession. The idea that we would suddenly change how we define what a recession is seems a little goofy, but we are in a recession. And the reality is that even if we want to say, well, these other things also define what a recession is, fine. But what is the salient part of a recession is the impact on consumers, right? And if we go by that as well, we're in a recession. We're already seeing a general tightening in manufacturing. We're seeing a reduction in employment or a reduction in growth for companies in terms of hiring. You can Google all the headlines you like. More people are talking about how they overhired over the last couple of years versus we should be hiring a whole bunch more. So in terms of what's felt on the streets and with the people who have the checkbooks that either do or don't make their car payment or their mortgage payment or pay their rent, that's the important part for us, because those are the things that push a market one direction or another. And as I pointed out last time, I think the potential for this is to hit real estate, but also to be faster, because in many areas, when you stop paying your rent, you simply need and I don't believe there's many protections in place anymore because of the pandemic. I don't believe there's any limit on getting kicked out of your house. If you stop paying your rent, you're going to lose the ability to stay in that home. You're going to get evicted. So I think the potential resolution path is also faster this time for things specific to these financial issues as they relate to the broad people out there who make up this $1.4 trillion bubble of car debt. All right. And I realize we've strayed a little bit off of the path, but in other areas, if we want to look at, so we just sort of did Santa Clara County as the big view. If we want to do, say, San Jose, and let's get a feeling for what's happening there, it's going to be more or less the same. San Jose is super hit. One of the articles that's come out this month is San Jose has the nation's largest decline in home prices. Northern California's largest city remains among the least affordable, but we've had the biggest drops. So the correction the wideness of the correction, the depth of the correction seems to go hand in hand with the almost irrational growth that it saw over the last couple of years. Let's see here. There was a nice little pit. Northern California's largest city by population with just under 1 million residents is one of only a handful of markets in which home prices have come off their peaks this year. The report by mortgage data firm Black Knight said all of those pullbacks, including in San Jose, have been modest. Black Knight's numbers show the firm uses a repeat sales index based on public records. California markets have generally experienced the strongest cooling in annual home price growth this year, as the state's 10 major core-based statistical areas, regions with at least one urban cluster of at least 10,000 people, such as San Francisco, San Jose, and Los Angeles, have had price gains decelerate by between 3 and 6 percentage points, the report said. Despite the dip, San Jose remains one of the nation's least affordable housing markets. An average priced home in the city requires monthly payments equal to 68% of the median household income. That's a record high for San Jose and a third more than what it was between 1995 and 2003. Only Los Angeles, where an average priced home requires monthly payments equal to 73% of the median household income, is more unaffordable. The decline in housing prices comes as the number of homes for sale in San Jose increased 23% in May from the year before, with an almost $1.5 million median price tag that was up 15% during that time. Now, given what we're seeing, if we just pull up, now, as I mentioned, the numbers I was just talking about were just Santa Clara County, not just San Jose. If I do look at San Jose and we see where we are at, because I think this is a moving target, we can see that just in San Jose over the last 7 days, 207 new listings, 11 price increases, 133 price decreases, 17 transactions fell through, 5 listings back on the market, 56 homes went contingent, 106 went pending. And if we take a look at the decreased prices, all of the ones we discussed before that were super high, those were all San Jose, right? And again, the closer we get to the ground, in other words, if we think of Santa Clara County as sort of a 10,000-foot view, we could think of San Jose as sort of a 5,000-foot view. And then as we go to smaller cities like Morgan Hill or Gilroy, Los Gatos, whatever smaller areas we want to look at, that's going to get obviously closer to the ground in specific marketplaces. But these numbers are nuts. And also the days on market numbers. And as I just expressed last time in the last coffee and real estate session, days on market is now a very relevant piece of data that we were able to pretty much ignore for the last few years because it was an artificially created number. Artificial meaning listing agents were simply saying, we will not let you make an offer on this house until such and such a date. So, and typically that was a 10-day waiting period, a 10 to 14-day waiting period, depending on whether or not that agent wanted to get 1 weekend of open houses or 2 weekends of open houses for the property to let more people look. And the reality now is we're seeing that going up. We are seeing, as I look at this, just at the homes that had their list price decreased, we're seeing days on market as 23 days, 24 days, 23, 32, 31, 31, 38, 136. So we're seeing a lot more days on market. But what's also interesting is we're seeing price decreases happening in relatively short periods of time. So if we look at days on market for some of these in San Jose, here's one that's been on the market for 9 days, just had a 7.46% drop in list price, which was basically $110,000. So what happened in 9 days? I would be concerned as a seller if after being listed for just 9 days, my agent came back and said, we need to drop the price. That indicates to me that the market analysis was pretty way off. I'll usually give it 2 weeks, right? Depending on the response, if after 2 weeks we don't get a certain level of interest, a certain level of viewings, etc., that's the time to start reviewing, right, what we're doing. So the fact that some of these are happening in such a short period of time, I'm trying to see if there's any others here that are also short. Here's another one where after 9 days, it had a 4.3% drop. What else? 11 days is a little bit more reasonable. But yeah, there are several here that are happening super fast, which indicates to me that there's agents out there creating market analysis that are a little bit disconnected from reality, or they're allowing higher than they should be listings to happen because that's what their seller wanted. So that's a possibility as well. Now let's take it down another notch. We've looked at what the San Jose numbers are. Let's look at Morgan Hill. Now, Morgan Hill is my local market. I actually just did my 7-day snapshot for Morgan Hill on Friday. And if you'd like to see those, you can find me on Instagram or again on Facebook to check those out. Let's see what Morgan Hill has to say. And these are numbers I actually looked at this morning. So for the last 7 days, we've had 11 new listings, 0 price increases, and 14 price decreases in Morgan Hill. 2 transactions fell through. 1 listing came back on the market. 5 homes went contingent. 12 homes went pending. And 12 homes sold, so they actually closed. And 4 listings got canceled. So let's look at the price decrease list and get a feel for it. This is a very much of a micro market. And even within Morgan Hill, my local area, there are markets where homes are still selling for over asking price. There are some very desirable neighborhoods that continue to be resilient in the current market. But we've got several homes here. One reduced from $2.24 million to $1.99 million. That's a 12.56% drop. That's a good example of homes at the higher end that are losing list prices. The next, let's see, and that one 11.11%. This one falls in the average price. It went from $1.2 million to $1,080,000. That's an 11% drop. And then we have another one that's really up there bumping up against that higher end at 1.6 million that was dropped to 1.45 for a 10.3% list price drop. And what's interesting is these folks had 26 days before they did their big drop, 11 days for the 1.2 million to 1,000,080. So this also indicates that we've got sellers who are understanding perhaps that the market is shifting, that they were originally perhaps not priced correctly and want to get out, want to make it move forward now. So in terms of what's happening with price decreases, huge upsurge in all markets. It wouldn't surprise me if the numbers we end up running that are the month summary that cover all of July end up with having an awful lot of surprises in them. But I think what we're also seeing here, and again, those numbers for last month will be an indicator that the list price versus sales price numbers, how much folks are listing their homes for in July, will be a big indicator of the psychology of sellers, at least for last month, for the month of July. If folks are internalizing these realities, a lot of things could happen. This would obviously perceive as a pivot in the marketplace that might push more sellers on the market to try to get the price they want while they think they can. It also represents an opportunity for buyers who potentially will see homes coming on the market where the sellers psychologically are already ready for the possibility that they're going to have to reduce their price. So for the first time in a long time, I think I'm able to suggest that buyers who are in the right position are going to be able to find some interesting opportunities. And that also is going to translate into investors potentially finding some good transactions. I am all in on multifamilies right now, so most of my searches are focusing on multifamily. But as we get into a marketplace where these prices continue to do what they're doing, single-family residentials become also super attractive as a buy and hold proposition for someone like myself. Okay. I hope that is some valuable information. I realize we sort of covered a pretty broad area in terms of the county and a couple of cities of different sizes to sort of get a better feel for it. What I would suggest is you do what I just did in the markets where you live and feel the most comfortable. If you're a very first-time investor, you're probably going to want to do something local. You want to do it in the area where you know the market the most. You know this is a great area or this is super desirable. Well, great. Use that knowledge. Partner up with a real estate agent because an awful lot of this information is stuff you're not going to be able to just get on places like Realtor.com. You're going to have to partner up with a real estate agent. Find one that doesn't annoy you. I know that's a big ask, but find one that'll set this stuff up for you to give you the tools you need to figure out what's going on, or find a local agent who does what I do and publishes this stuff on a regular basis. I do it weekly for Morgan Hill specifically, but you can always team up with someone who I think will give you this info. Now, of course, the goal is always to leave you with far more information on the table than you spent in your time. I hope we have accomplished that today. I think this conversation is going to continue. This is a very evolving, cutting edge of the market discussion. And I believe we're going to be having this one again. We're going to be revisiting this one. So hope to see you again. But the goal is to leave more information on the table that you've invested in time. I hope we've achieved that. Thanks again for listening. And I'll talk to all you next time.